an experienced detective named Danny and his partner begin watching a local bank. Nick explains that 2 other branches of the same bank were robbed before, and both times the thieves only took a single safe deposit box with the same number. After arriving, the detectives and their team sit inside a bus to monitor everything outside the bank. At the same time, Danny feels like he has seen a certain man somewhere before. Just then a woman sits next to Delrain on a bench. Without paying attention to anything around her, she suddenly walks into the street. Soon after, Delrain casually talks to the officers outside the bank, who allow him to walk inside without suspicion. However, Danny senses something strange about him and immediately follows. When Danny enters the bank, an employee tries to stop him. This gives Danny the chance to unlock the same safe deposit box targeted in the previous robberies. To his shock, he finds a photo of his daughter inside, along with a message that says "Find Delrain." Meanwhile, outside the bank, the strange woman suddenly starts screaming that the weather is too hot while taking off her clothes. She then runs into traffic, causing a huge accident that blocks the entire road. At that moment, Delrain also enters the bank. Soon after, the police stormed inside, threatened everyone and forced them out while a receptionist went to retrieve the safe deposit box. Seeing this, Danny pulls out his gun and orders her to stop. Later, the woman and the box are taken into a police truck. Just then Delrain suddenly appears near the overturned truck. However, before Danny can react, a bomb explodes and destroys all the evidence. Moments later, Danny spots Delrain running away and immediately chases after him. However, it turns out to be the 2 detectives working with him. The 3 head to the rooftop where they finally find Delrain again. But the moment he says Danny has the wrong person, the 2 detectives suddenly point their guns at Danny. Soon after, Delrain mentions someone named Lyle. After seeing the photo, Delrain realizes the safe deposit box is actually empty. At that moment, Nick arrives on the rooftop as well. When Danny looks down at the street, Delrain has completely vanished. Later, Nick tells Danny that only 1 security guard survived, but the man claims he remembers nothing. In reality, Lyle is the same man Danny once accused of making his daughter disappear. However, Lyle always insists he remembers nothing. He even claims he has no idea what he was doing there. That night, Danny begins reviewing security footage. Just then Nick calls and says they have traced the mysterious phone number before sending Danny an address. Soon after, Danny arrives and meets a psychic named Diana, who has the power to control other people's minds. Danny starts asking her questions, but Diana refuses to answer and tells him to leave. At that moment, another man suddenly approaches a large stranger before crashing a motorcycle into the building, trying to kill both Diana and Danny. Luckily, they escape in time while the attacker dies after failing. After the incident, Diana also becomes a target. She finally reveals the truth, explaining that Delrain is a hypnotic, someone with the power to hypnotize and control minds. Diana has similar abilities because both of them once belonged to a secret organization, a hidden agency working for the US government. The program was created to train people who could read and control their thoughts. At first, the organization pretended to help humanity. However, they later discovered its real goal was to use those powers to control the entire world. At first, Danny refuses to believe Diana. Then with just a few words, Nick suddenly sits down crying before being casually sent to buy cigarettes. Diana then reveals that Delrain is the strongest hypnotic of them all. Later, Diana leaves the organization to live a peaceful life. However, after reading news about the robberies and realizing nobody remembers what happened, she immediately understands that Delrain must be behind everything. Meanwhile, outside the police station, Delrain uses his powers on Nick. Cornered with no other choice, Danny is forced to shoot Nick in the leg. After a violent struggle, Danny finally manages to chain him to the jail bars. However, Nick is still under Delrain's control and keeps trying to carry out his orders. Even with badly injured hands, the pain is not enough to stop him from freeing himself. At that moment, Diana suddenly steps forward and shoots Nick in the head. Seeing this, Danny becomes furious. However, Diana says he was going to die anyway and she only ended his suffering. Now they have no way to explain Nick's death. As a result, Danny and Diana flee the city, while their faces begin appearing on the news as wanted criminals. While eating, Danny admits that he finally believes Lyle. Lyle always claimed he remembered nothing, and now Danny believes Delrain is the one who made Minnie disappear. Just then, an undercover officer enters the diner and recognizes them. Diana even forces the officer to pay for their meal. As Danny and Diana prepare to leave, the officer's radio suddenly receives a message. The moment they step outside, they see Delrain waiting with 2 police officers. Danny tells Diana to run while he distracts them. He runs toward a railway, trying to hide behind a moving train to avoid gunfire. However, after hiding for a while, Danny turns around and is shocked to see strange images appearing before his eyes. Then he hears footsteps behind him. Delrain and the officers have arrived. Suddenly, everything around him begins fading away, and Danny realizes it is all another illusion created by Delrain. Just as the officers prepare to kill Danny, a truck suddenly crashes into them and sends them flying. After escaping, Danny and Diana continue toward the Mexican border. Along the way, Diana explains that hypnotics can make people see anything they want until the victim's mind is fully controlled. However, she says Danny's mind seems unusually strong because even she cannot use her powers on him. Still, she warns him that Delrain is powerful enough to do it. When they arrive near the border, a guard stops them. After Diana uses her abilities, the guard immediately lets them pass with a smile. Soon after, Danny and Diana meet Jeremiah, a man who once worked with Diana and Delrain. According to Diana, only Delrain can control Jeremiah's mind. When they knock on the door, Jeremiah tells his housekeeper to answer it while staying inside with a gun. However, the moment Danny enters alone, the housekeeper suddenly points a gun at Jeremiah. It turns out the housekeeper is actually Diana. She used her powers to disguise herself and hide the real maid inside a closet. When Danny asks whether Jeremiah knows anything about Delrain, he reveals that Delrain is searching for something called a secret weapon created by the mysterious organization. The weapon can control anyone's mind, no matter how mentally strong they are. To hide its location, Delrain even erased his own memories, leaving behind clues in case he could recover them later. However, the organization eventually found him. Now he is following those clues to find the weapon again. Jeremiah suspects one of the clues is hidden inside the bank's safe deposit boxes. Hearing this, Danny reveals that he found a photo of his daughter inside one of them. The moment Jeremiah picks up the photo, Diana suddenly becomes suspicious. Then the shocking truth is revealed. Jeremiah is actually Delrain, who changed his appearance to hide his identity. The moment he gets the chance, Delrain opens fire on both of them. Suddenly, nearby civilians turn and attack Danny and Diana because Delrain is controlling their minds. To create chaos, Danny fires into the air, causing everyone to panic and run. After that, they steal a car and speed away, knocking aside anyone who tries to stop them. Meanwhile, Diana keeps reminding Danny that everything around him is only an illusion created by Delrain. Soon after, the two abandon the motorcycle and continue running on foot, only to end up trapped inside a dead-end alley. At that moment, Delrain appears with an entire group of police officers under his control. However, Danny suddenly remembers what Diana once said about his unusual mind. Focusing all his willpower, Danny somehow causes the officers to suddenly turn against Delrain and arrest him instead. While the police drag Delrain away, Danny starts acting strangely. He never had any powers before. Now he suddenly finds himself able to control other people's minds. Diana immediately says this should be impossible, and warns him that sooner or later he will forget everything. Afterward, they visit Diana's friend River, a genius hacker who once built the network system for the secret organization. River starts searching Danny's records on the computer but cannot find any information about his wife. As he digs deeper, Danny's heart breaks all over again. He discovers that his wife was also a member of the mysterious organization, and her files are protected under extreme security. River even says it could take hours to track down her location. Later, Danny and Diana go into another room to rest. Ever since Minnie disappeared, Vivian has never forgiven him. At that moment, Danny begins wondering if Vivian may have lied about her job all along. Soon after, while Diana is showering, Danny suddenly receives a call from an unknown number. Using his powers, Delrain forces Danny to attack Diana. However, traces of Delrain's hypnosis remain inside Danny's mind. Suddenly, Danny slams his hands onto the table before walking toward Diana. To his horror, he realizes he is holding a pair of scissors, yet he has no memory of picking them up. Trying desperately to stay calm, Danny forces himself to stab the scissors into the wall and step away. However, when Diana walks closer, Danny is horrified to see the scissors somehow still in his hand. Fighting against his own body, he slowly walks toward her. Luckily, Diana sees everything through the mirror. At the last second, she suddenly kisses Danny to break his concentration. That night, Danny keeps dreaming about memories of his family. Later, Danny quietly enters River's room and is shocked to discover on the computer that Diana's real name is actually Vivian, and she is still working for the secret organization. It turns out Danny's memories have been altered. Every time he looks at old photos, he still sees Vivian's face. Then Danny opens Minnie's file and freezes in shock after discovering that Minnie herself is actually Domino. Since both of Minnie's parents are incredibly powerful hypnotics, she was born with terrifying abilities of her own. At that moment, Diana wakes up and finally tells him the truth. When the organization discovered Minnie's powers, they decided to train her to become the strongest hypnotic in the world. Diana agreed with the plan, but Danny refused to let the government exploit a little girl. Because of that, he kidnapped Minnie himself before erasing and altering his own memories to hide her location. Hearing this, Danny's real memories slowly begin returning. He remembers wanting to hide Minnie from everyone, even from himself. Suddenly, River's room disappears, and Danny realizes he is actually inside the secret organization's headquarters. Their countless agents begin pressuring him to dig deeper into his memories and remember where Minnie is hidden. His entire life as a detective turns out to be fake, and everything he experienced with his psychiatrist was only part of the organization's plan to make him remember where he hid his daughter. Everyone around him has been a member of the organization all along, simply playing their assigned roles. Even Delrain appears there holding the photo. He explains that the message written on it is the key to finding Minnie. For the past 4 years, they have repeatedly tried to make Danny remember the truth. However, every time he gets close to remembering, he somehow ruins everything, forcing them to start over from the beginning. This time Danny refuses to cooperate and runs outside. Only then does he realize that all the buildings around him are fake sets built to maintain the illusion. Immediately, agents from the secret organization surround him and knock him unconscious once again. Some time later, Danny wakes up inside a laboratory. Diana tells him that no matter how fake everything may have been, her love for him and their daughter was always real. However, Danny only responds with anger and insults. In the end, Diana and the others strap Danny into a machine and erase his memories again, making sure that whenever anyone asks questions, he can only answer "I don't know." When Danny opens his eyes again, he finds himself sitting inside a psychiatrist's office. Everything repeats exactly like before, the same words and the same actions. In reality, the secret organization has connected him to a machine while agents once again play their assigned roles. However, while stepping into the fake elevator, Danny looks at his phone and notices photos showing Diana's real face. This proves that his mind has become so powerful that no agent can erase his memories anymore. Even so, Danny pretends to follow the organization's script. Just then Nick arrives to pick him up, and together they head back to the bank, which is actually another simulation. While watching the security footage, Danny pretends to say that he forgot the case file inside his notebook. Then, just like before, he walks outside and heads toward the bank. However, while all the agents wait for Danny to walk through the door, he suddenly disappears. As everyone begins searching for him, Danny steals a truck and speeds away, smashing through everything in his path. Diana tries using her powers to stop him, but Danny's mind has grown too strong and he keeps driving forward at full speed. At the same time, Nick finds Danny's notebook and starts shading the pages with a pencil. This allows him to discover that the puzzle may actually reveal Minnie's location. A few hours later, Danny arrives. Only after confirming that he has fully remembered everything do they allow him inside. There Danny sees an older Minnie playing with Domino. Suddenly, Minnie says that her mother is nearby as well. At the same time, agents from the secret organization begin arriving by helicopter. Before long, Danny realizes that Carl and Thelma are actually his foster parents. The moment the agents appear, Carl and Thelma immediately open fire as a warning. They speak to Diana as if they have known her for years. Diana cannot remember them at all. When they refuse to surrender, Delrain orders his men to open fire. Diana runs toward Carl and Thelma, begging them to tell her something about her daughter before it is too late. Just then, Danny walks outside and says that the woman he once loved would never want their daughter to live a life like this. He tries to convince Diana that her mind is still being controlled by the secret organization. Moments later, Minnie steps outside and hugs her mother. She tells her, "I'm proud that you came home." However, Diana still has no idea what is happening. Then Minnie reveals that everything has been part of a plan to escape the secret organization. Hearing this, Delrain instantly loses control after realizing that everything around him is fake. He frantically fires at the house, but nothing happens. Minnie immediately uses her powers to control Nick and orders him to kill the remaining agents. The survivors are then manipulated by Danny, who forces them to turn on one another. Suddenly, the illusion disappears. Delrain realizes he is actually standing in the middle of a fake movie set built deep in the mountains. At that moment, Carl and Thelma stand back up and continue shooting the remaining agents. Meanwhile, Minnie gently presses her forehead against her mother's, restoring Diana's memories. Inside the memories, Diana sees herself tied to a chair while a man wearing a red mask erases her memories. She screams and begs him to stop, but no one listens. When Diana opens her eyes again, she is completely shocked after all her memories suddenly return. At that moment, Delrain keeps firing at them, but Minnie uses her powers to take control of him before killing him on the spot. Afterward, Danny finally reveals the whole truth. Once the secret organization discovered Minnie's abilities, they immediately began training her and saw her as a powerful weapon for the government and future wars. However, neither Danny nor Diana wanted that kind of future for their daughter. At the same time, they knew the organization would never allow someone as powerful as Minnie to simply walk away. Because of that, they came up with a plan to disappear and hide Minnie with her grandparents, allowing her to secretly train her powers until she became strong enough to fight back against the entire organization. Afterward, both Danny and Diana erased their own memories. Before doing so, Danny secretly left behind clues inside the photo. Then Danny, wearing the red mask, personally altered Diana's memories, making her believe she was loyal to the secret organization. He planned that one day, she would unknowingly lead the entire organization to this place so they could finally destroy them all. In the end, the whole family embraces one another, because after everything they have endured, they are finally free from the secret organization and able to live in peace.